The online dialogue series of Refugee Poets was commissioned by the Special Initiative on Displacement SIF program of the Civil Peace Service of GIZ. We appreciate the discussions and insights shared. The opinions expressed in these dialogue series are those of the speakers. They do not necessarily reflect the opinions or views of GIZ. So, what does a refugee look like?
I'm Apollo, and I'm a poet. I'm just coming to express myself in terms of who a refugee is, and my experiences in a foreign country. For me, who a refugee is, or what does a refugee look like? To be specific, I'm confused sometimes. Like, how should I look like, or what should we, be portraying out there? When I'm asked, like, are you really a refugee? And I'm like, should I look otherwise or something? Or what notion do you have of a refugee should be? And then they're like, no, you don't really look like a refugee. So should we be emaciated, malnourished or something of that sort? I think we're just humans like any other person, and we should be taken just like that. We are humans. We just like you, So yeah, just take me as I am. Don't ask me what should I look like, actually. Yeah, I'm just the way I am.
Thank you. Take you as you are.
Yeah, take me as I am.
Jean-Paul.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Jean-Paul Kasika. So I'm a coordinator for RELON. Stands for Refugee-Led Organization Network of Kenya. So we do a couple of advocacy in terms of having refugees on board, so to be included on decision making. So if you really ask me, a refugee is, or how should a refugee look like, I don't really know how to answer that question. Instead, it should be me asking you, how should a refugee look like? Because yes, I'm a refugee. And I understand a refugee is someone fleeing from his origin country to another country, crossing the international border, but that is just a definition. But sincerely speaking, there is too much definitions of a refugee. And each and every individual has his own understanding how to define a refugee. So as Paulo said, many of people, when they look at you and you tell them you are a refugee, they start underrating. Like, you don't look like one. Then I keep to ask them, so how should a refugee look like? So it's a conversation that we need to keep on discussing and also get to learn for those who does not know who is a refugee and why someone become a refugee. So.
Thank you.
And me? Yeah, my name is Maya Aluel. And part of my identity, I was born, raised in a refugee camp, And I like to stick to that most of the time, because when you're asked, Maya, you don't look like a refugee, it's very strange, you start asking, what have been people telling you about a refugee? What are the stories that exist outside there about refugees? And I feel like it's a responsibility for each one of us and for everyone, especially the media, because we set agenda at the end of the day, and that's how we define people, we define things. So when you define those things, do you keep it in mind? You're dealing with humans. You're dealing with things about their identity, and it can directly influence how they are treated depending on that story. So I usually feel there is a representation of refugees that is perceived out there on how we should look like. And most of the time, from my experience, people get shocked when they see a well-packaged individual terming themselves as a refugee, because there is already a narrative that exists. You're not supposed to be as smart. You're not supposed to look so healthy. You're not supposed to look so well put together. And I'm like, that is your perception. That is what you've been told a refugee should look like. But in all honesty, we're just normal human beings who have fled their countries for different reasons in search of security. But that do not take away the individual I am as Maya, yeah? So when you say I do not look like a refugee, the problem starts there. What do you think I should look like? Yeah, yeah. So I feel like for identity, and that's why I feel for refugees, for the generations of refugees that we are, there is an identity crisis. You are born, raised in Kenya. And from there, you know you are Kenyan by birth. But as you begin to navigate and you grow, you're reminded in schools, you're reminded at places of work that you are not actually Kenyan. And that's when now you go back to the basics. You ask your parent, who am I? Because I literally found myself here. So I assume I'm part of this community. And that's now when you start learning bits of your identity and how your identity has been portrayed over the years. So I feel like it's still a conversation that needs to go on in people to redefine who is a refugee. Yeah.
Thank you. I mean, thank you. Thank you, Apollo. Thank you, Jean-Paul. Thank you, Maya. And thank you, our audience, for one, tuning in, two, wanting to learn and unlearn your previously held notions. And so today, we are as we always explore on this podcast, we are exploring more about issues to do with refugees. And this question of what does a refugee look like? Who is a refugee? I would want us to think it over and mull it over, although our topic today is on peace and security and how we as a host community, so when I say we, this means the Kenyan society as a host community, so how the host community, the civil society organizations, and by the way, my two guests here are founders of CSOs, and how the refugees as well can, so this is a conversation between refugees, the CSO, and the host communities. How do we foster peace? How do we foster security? How do we integrate? We're building up on the conversations that we've had from our previous 3 episodes, and I'm super excited to have you here. And just a quick reminder, this podcast is part of a series that is part of Refu Poet 2021 edition. And we are grateful to be powered by GIZ and the Anika Initiative. And this is a safe space where we have conversations about refugees with refugees. So refugees tell their stories. And thank you so much for joining. Thank you for tuning in. We ask that you communicate with us on our socials so that you're part of this conversation. So now, my name is Joy Chenyenyuzi, and welcome to our conversation on peace and security. So why I started by asking who a refugee looks like is because I remember when there was a bombing. And then there were issues of, I think it was the Westgate Mall that was bombed. Yeah, it was the Westgate Mall that was bombed. And then from there, anyone who had a turban or a dera or they tied their head in a certain way, or they were of a certain faith, they became or looked in a certain way, basically. They became associated with terror. And then right after came, I think, the conversation on the first camp closure, right? So why I asked who a refugee looks like is because I realized that security and perception of identity tie in together. And how can we have peace if we do not have these conversations, right? So my immediate question is, do you feel safe as an individual, and as an individual, so you as an entity and you who bears the tag of a refugee, do you feel safe within the host community? Do you feel safe in the camps? And I will start with Jean-Paul, and then I will come to you, Maya, and then I will come to you, Apollo.
Yeah, thank you, Joy. So maybe let me begin from where you've started, especially during the attack at that mall, Westgate.
Yeah, Westgate, yeah.
So there's something that a statement, with all due respect, especially to the former internal cabinet secretary, Mr. Olelenko. So that generalization of all refugees are terrorists. So I remember at that time, refugees, they were considered as threat to the national security. Yes, I understand national security is of paramount, but you should not generalize. If something happened, yes, we know there's judicial systems in place. So the way Kenyan are treated or tried in the Kenyan courts, so it should happen to any other individual who are found within the territories of Kenya. So if it was suspected that it is refugees who had undertaken that attack, then I believe the national intelligence has all the information, and you bring these people to the book like any other individual instead of generalizing. And I remember, as you said, yes, we do have fear when something happens, especially when it's associated to security and refugees. So like securitization of refugees, it's something that should not be put as if it's all refugees. Yes, in every community or society, there is good and bad elements. We understand. And during that particular time, I remember many people feared even to come out, including myself, because there was a lot of arbitrary arrest. The police takes advantage of the situation. So especially when there is a statement released in terms of camp closure or any attacks that are related to either Al-Shabaab or outsiders. So refugees were now not feeling so much comfortable walking around. So rather you prefer to stay indoors. So that at least you can watch from what is going around, and especially the surrounding, your neighbors, if they happen to know that this is a refugee, they start looking at you as if you are a threat to them. So, and yet you've lived with them for all that time and nothing has happened. So yes, including myself, I do have fear. So when something happened.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Again, I am very keen on telling you that your stories are safe and that I feel very honored to be listening to what you have shared. So thank you. Thank you very much. So Maya.
Yeah. I think when you tackle the security issue and identity, it's a very tricky ground, yeah. It's very relative and also, yeah. So it's very bumpy, because my reasoning is Kenya knew what they were getting themselves into when they were taking refugees, yeah. It was a responsibility for them to offer that kind of protection, and responsibility also comes with, security. So with that kind of, knowing that you will be accountable for these people, also means that refugees should be considered even in conversations to do with security. So what really breaks the hearts of so many refugees and mine is one person makes a mistake and you want to punish an entire community. We have 500,000 of refugees in Kenya. So imagine you want to punish all 500,000 of people in Kenya that you have offered security for years simply because one individual have acted out of law. Is that what you do to other Kenyans? In the terror attack conversation, it's a very sensitive topic as it is, and no one is, is advocating for war and violence. But there are incidences where also Kenyans have also contributed in those kind of, attacks. Do we go now to their families and wipe them out of Kenya? We erase them as Kenyans simply because one member of their family has been found. So it's very unreasonable. So I think, like my friend Jean said, there are policies in place. There is a system. Put them on trial and call those people to book. And about safety and identity, it's a very bumpy ground. I am Maya, a refugee born in a refugee camp. Those are tags that I have to carry. And on top of it, I'm originally from South Sudan, a country that has been known of nothing but violence. So that is part of my identity. I did not choose to be born in a violent place. Yeah, I did not choose to end up in Kenya as a refugee. It's a tag that I have to carry. God knows when it will ever end. So when you use it, I'm just trying to make life happen like any other human being in Kenya. I'm trying to secure education. I'm trying to just establish myself from broken pieces that are attached to my identity. So when now all of that is in jeopardy because someone else has done something, do you think it's fair to me as someone who is rebuilding from nothing? Do you think it's fair to any other millions of refugees that are building from nothing? Because when we have these conversations, we have to keep in mind, refugees do not choose to belong to Kenya. If something happens today, we are in this room. Do you have your passport? Do you have your charger? Do you have enough money on you? That's the situation we found ourselves in. Everyone was fleeing for safety. No one came to Kenya thinking, now I don't want South Sudan, it's a very fancy country. No, we didn't have a choice. And when someone is fleeing to come to a country, a neighboring country, they want a peaceful place where they can sleep without the sound of a gun. Like it's very simple things that you'll take for granted. Just sleeping without the sound of a gun. Sleeping knowing you will not wake up not having your kids. You will not wake up not having a member of your family. A lot of reconnection is still being done. So imagine these people are already traumatized. They don't want to go back to conflict. And you're still introducing conflict. Then how? What's the point of, taking on that responsibility of offering them a space in the first place? Mm-hmm. What's the point?
I hear you. I hear you on the need to take responsibility. I mean, Kenya is the one that signed I think in 1951 or 61. I am so sorry. But Kenya signed 51. Yeah. Thank you. 1951 convention. Kenya signed. And so we are bound by that signature. And the implications of hosting people equals to you think about security. So I hear both of you on this, and I hear you on the need to have proper systems that do not exclude others and advance the othering. Yeah. Now, Apollo, tell me your take.
I think I'll start from where Maya left. Like, I didn't choose to be who I am.
Yeah.
So, having this conversation of how a refugee should handle stuffs and, all these things thrown to us. I think we should start from security from what and from whom, security for who. In this case, I think it's security for refugees as individuals, and I think we just need ample security. It's just what we need, because we are fleeing from conflict, we are fleeing from war-torn countries, and what we are going to, these countries that are taking us in are where we find it secure. So if I don't find it secure in my second home, and we're trying to be taken to another country or being taken back home where it's conflict, it brings about questions like, do you really know our stories? Who are we? Do you converse with us? Do you get to know the root causes of where we are from and where we have to go to? And then am I safe? In my environment, I'll say yes, and I'll say no. Yes, because home, Kenya has been home away from home. It has accommodated me for 24 years. I was born and nurtured in Kenya. So Kenya is home away from home. And if you want to take me back to a country I don't feel safe in, are you really being fair with me? Have you conversed with refugees? Have you gotten to know their stories? Are you sure of what they feel safe from or where they are not safe? And I'll say no again. I don't feel safe. I get to interact with Kenyans, and then they're like, she's a South Sudanese. So they get this notion that they should seclude themselves from me. Personally, I would feel bad because I need people to talk to. I need a family, because I'm from somewhere, we are always secluded. You don't know about me. You don't get to converse with me. You don't get to know what is really happening with me. So I don't feel safe because people always see me as a conflicting person, someone who's violent, someone who's aggressive, in their talk. So refugees feel safe sometimes, but in the bigger notion, we don't. We are always, taken as something else, something violent, a terrorist, in that case. And it doesn't feel nice. It doesn't feel nice. We just need ample security. We just need to feel loved, give us the feeling that we need to have.
So what I'm hearing is, again, thank you. Thank you for sharing. Maya, thank you for sharing. I realized I did not say thank you. Apollo, what I hear you saying is, again, so you have brought up an interesting angle to this. This need to provide security for refugees such that refugees also feel safe. So not just think of just have a conversation about security, but also when this conversation of security is happening, there should be conversation on security for refugees. Now, when we are there, I have just remembered this. So remember when COVID-19 hit the first wave, so there came the regulations and the restrictions and all that. Was this one? No, that is a very little. Yes, was this a sort of? Was this a bad place to be at as a refugee? Given that you already. So the nationals within the country, the people within the host community, the security was. They had to face new regulations in terms of curfew, in terms of wearing masks. So what is that like for refugees in the urban setup and refugees in the camps as well? do these regulations apply within the camps and within the urban refugees setup? What is that particular situation like? Yeah? Okay. So I'll start with you, Maya. Then go to Jean-Paul, and then I will come to you, Apollo. Yeah.
Honestly speaking, when the first, COVID-19 case was confirmed in Kenya, and, news were all over, things being given, instructions on what to do to curb, the spread of the COVID virus. And one thing that I realized and just felt left out is the fact that some of the regulations or some of the instructions that were put forth for others to follow, they were not inclusive.
Like which ones?
They were not inclusive in terms of, if they're practical. Because you come to Kenya assumed they didn't host any refugees. Because refugees, let me give you a mental picture of how a refugee camp is like. It's an enclosed area, yeah? Facilities, very critical facilities are shared. Things like, bathrooms, taps, water points. Water points usually work, they're scheduled because water is rationed, sorry. So you have water running for 2 hours in the morning and also running for 2 hours in the evening. And always is a scramble for, these facilities that are shared. And you also find distribution of food, the monthly distribution of food by UNHCR. And World Food Program, it happens monthly and people queue in a line. So there is really no space. It's always, survival of the fittest. The stronger one gets in first. So you really can't control that. The toilets are shared. You find the accommodation that is provided by UNHCR, others are in tents. They're sharing with the family. They can be even 12. The households are not enough. Others have to go out of their way, and do like the motorcycle businesses and things like that. So when you're telling me to social distance, can I social distance on an empty stomach? So those are the questions. Already the food I'm being given, it's not enough. The economic practices, the livelihood survival in the camp, it's very low because our documentation do not allow for businesses. If you work for NGOs, you're not paid according to the kind of skills that you provide. There is already a policy that exists. Refugees can't be paid more than $100. So you find all of that. There are already so many restricting policies, and now there is a pandemic. And clearly, the organization concerned for refugees were not prepared. There were no emergency funds for refugees. So it's like now going back to the vision board and trying to see what can we pull together to make sure that these refugees are protected. But even the government had an obligation to also be considerate to what is practical in a refugee camp and what is not practical. But it did not happen. We were told social distance, be home, and I'm like, it can't happen. You can't tell a mother who has 8 kids to stay at home. You can't tell a mother who needs water for survival to stay at home because now they can't queue for the water. We share toilets, we share bathrooms. So honestly, are you going to be spraying? Also, the level of economy, have I explained, they can't afford masks. They can't afford, sanitizers. In fact, a lot of them didn't even know there are things called sanitizers. So it's now, and the kind of information that get there, it's already distorted. There's already breakdown of information by the time it gets to the camp. Because we are just depending on social media, depending on a third party, because no one is communicating to us directly, yeah?
Okay.
So now when that happens, it's like chaos in the camp, confusion. Everyone is coming with their own theory. Everyone is coming with their own theory. So it really affected everyone in terms of, availability of resources there and everything, even mentally. And also police brutality. You're now found without a mask, they beat you thoroughly. And the fact that the refugee conversations, it's usually, even the security one, there is so much huge procedure that you follow before they can listen to your case. And most of the time, it's thrown out of window. because the courts are run by the Kenyan police. And it's the Kenyan police that was involved in injuring. So you found a lot of death occurred during that period that were committed by police that is meant to protect these individuals, and they were never accounted for. Yeah. So I felt like there was a gap. And that's now when I saw potential of what refugee inclusion can do. Because it was now upon us as youth who are informed and who are exposed to know now how to disseminate some of this information to break that barrier of, miscommunication. And also just trying to use social media and our own networks to pull together funds to reach out to our people, because no one was paying attention to my community. Yeah. So by the time they got there, they already found us on the ground, because what happened is the country was in a lockdown. NGOs had an opportunity to bring back their people from the camp. So now when main people, people from hospitals are removed, they go on a break. Who will take care of these refugees? Yeah. So it was just a very chaotic thing that really, really messed up a lot of guys, and we started having incidences of suicide because others, felt vulnerable and they could not afford some of the very basic needs for their families. Yeah. So I feel like there was a huge gap. Yeah.
Thank you for highlighting and even creating a mental picture of what the camps look like, and making me realize the opportunities that I have and my privileges even. So thank you for that. Thank you for sharing and for that information as well.
Yeah, thank you, Joy. And maybe let me start by thanking the Kenyan government for hosting refugees for so many decades, and also for the government of Kenya through the Cabinet Secretary of Interior for realizing that there was a gap, and especially when during the COVID came, people are not prepared. And there was an immediate order that people should have that culture of working from home, and ordering the police not to arrest people who does not have proper document, or even with expired visa or expired documents.
Oh, there was a directive.
There was a directive, I remember. So though some of the security apparatus were not following the order. Because if you remember that time, even the people who should provide the documentation to the refugees were nowhere to be found. As she said, most of the agencies, they pulled out from the camp, and also even in the urban, they were not working. So until today, as we speak, some of them are still working from home. It's only a few who have resumed. So it was a bit difficult moment for us and also our people. So they didn't have any information, proper information regarding what is COVID. As she said, if there's need of having refugees included at all levels, so that at least we also get to learn what is happening and also get to inform our people, because there's not each and everyone that is capable to express himself in English or Swahili. So information sharing is very important. So if you remember very well, His Excellency the President of the Republic of Kenya, he said clearly that we should have this culture of not to go, is it cashless? So that
we should go cashless.
Cashless, so that we avoid the spread of
handing money.
Yes, handing money.
Yeah.
But again, not every refugee who has an M-Pesa access due to
the restriction
improper
and
documentation and restriction. So if you ask Safaricom, they will tell you it's a directive that came from the government, of which you've never heard of it. So we kept on asking the Safaricom can we get to know from which office so that at least we can follow up? So they don't want to say. They say it's Communication Authority of Kenya which gave order, of which such directive were not gazetted. So whether you have an alien card, so I found there's a bit of contradiction among the government entities, because if you go to this place, they tell you, no, you see, you need to have this before you can get this, especially when it comes to KRA PIN. You need to have a work permit before you can get a KRA PIN. So how does that work? So there's a bit of confusion. So most of the refugees, I can say they were somehow conned without knowing, because I'd come to you as a friend, kindly register this line for me. So if you discover there is some money sent in that line, now you call Safaricom telling them, you see, I lost my line or I forgot the PIN. Okay. So they block it so that you are given a new PIN, because the ID is yours and you get to use that. Even the M-Pesa PIN, you change. So you take advantage of the situation. So refugees were left on their own to cushion their people during the COVID-19. And the responsible agents were there. But as she said, they were not prepared. But yes, even if you're not prepared, it's good even in your house, you tell your children, this is the situation. So you might not be having all what they need, but it's good to have a conversation with them. So this is what has happened and this is what is there. So take what is there or leave it. But there was no such kind of a communication. So we became more vulnerable than even before.
Yeah.
So the other thing is that if refugees are included, as she said, it would be much more easy even to disseminate that information to the
refugee
grassroots within the refugee communities in their own language that they understand. Does not mean they never went to school because they don't speak English or Kiswahili. So each and everyone, we come from different background and culture. So if this person speaks French or maybe you went to school, he learned in Arabic, you don't force that person into your space. Rather, it's a discussion that we need to negotiate. So even when living within the society, you need to understand me so that I can also understand you. So you don't want me to accommodate you and yet you are not ready also to accommodate
you.
So I think there is a lot of gaps that needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
Very openly without fear of contradiction. So the responsible bodies, whether stakeholders, agencies, they need to realize that time has come for now refugee to be brought on board.
Let's have a conversation.
In every discussion that concerns the refugees, we must have refugees on board in order to achieve, because you will not design a project that suits me without having done an assessment and get to understand what are the needs that are there.
Yeah.
So you need first and foremost to come back on the drawing board and sit with the refugees. There are people like you. We need to have this conversation.
Yeah.
What is affecting us? What is the most need? As she said, instead of the security apparatus to offer security to all people within the Kenyan territories, now you start discriminating because this one is not a Kenyan. That's why I cannot
offer the same services.
Same services. And yet you deserve. Even in the Constitution, there is that chapter on the Bill of Rights. Have you not violated? Because everyone, it says it does not only state for Kenyans. Everyone who's within the Kenyan territories must be given the same service. Yeah. So I think there's a big gap, and the way we are looked at, refugees, so there is a need to change that thinking.
Yeah. Thank you. You have highlighted the need for proper communication channels, the need to, you both have reiterated this, to treat refugees in the same manner as the members of the host communities are treated. And I did not know about the directive on the documentation. I clearly am part of the people who had no idea that existed. Thank you for shedding light on that one as well. Now, Afole, tell me.
Thank you. I appreciate. So I'll start by is awareness created? Are these people aware of what's happening in Kenya? Were these people aware of what was happening in Kenya when the pandemic hit?
So when you're saying these people, we're talking about the refugees within the camps or within the urban setting?
Or within the camps.
Oh, camps, okay.
Yeah, because, majority of those who are in the urban areas are informed of what's happening, but not all. Okay? So do those in the camps know of what's happening? No, most of them live in the dark. I'll have to, generalize. Turkana is marginalized. If you get to interact with those in Turkana and, the northeastern part, they don't term themselves as Kenyans. Why is this? They have been marginalized. Resources are not taken to Turkana district. It's limited. It's just the case like when they found oil in Turkana district, they became violent. Why? They don't take themselves as Kenyans because they have been marginalized. And now when refugees come in, then who are they? If Turkana people can be marginalized, what of refugees? Do they have any information of what's happening in Kenya? In their area, that is, in the camps. So, I think it should be included in all conversations that, let's bring aboard who is to communicate with these people. Talking of the organizations, a majority of people or the staff working there, are they aware of who a refugee is? Okay, yes, they are, but it's limited. Like they try their shoe, try fit who they are,
I just feel like doing this at this point.
Exactly. Try my shoe. Have you fit my shoe? Have you fit in it? Try and get to know who a refugee is. Let them know of what's happening around, and I think we should just involve them.
Yeah.
They are not involved in anything, or if they are, then it's biased. I'll have to be open with that. It's biased. Coming to security and, documentation, we live in fear. We are always trying to run away from where we should be safe,
Let me just ask this. Sorry. Do you all have your IDs on?
Exactly. I have mine. It's there.
Yeah. All right.
Because, I might be found in a certain corner that, come here. Do you have your documentation? Is it valid? And if it's valid, they don't want to check it. Let me just be honest, they just take you in. And that's where the perception of refugees are rich came in. Because we don't want to be in a how can I put it? We need to be,
just don't want to go to there.
We don't want to go there. We are innocent. We have the documents. They are valid, but are they checked?
Yeah.
That's not the point. We're just taken in and harassed. So most of the refugees here are always trying to run away from where they should be safe.
Yeah.
So if it comes to police brutality, I wouldn't even talk about that because I was working with a friend of mine, a classmate of mine. He's a refugee. Okay, we are South Sudanese, both of us. But the time he saw a police, he had to take a corner. And he was like, you're not always taken as a South Sudanese, so you just walk. As for me, I'm not safe. He fled. Why? Because most of the times we are harassed. The reason as to why he said, you're always safe in Kenyans' hands is because, there is a perception of refugees. You should look somehow. My body doesn't, according to people, my body doesn't feel like I should be a South Sudanese or I should be a refugee. And then he was like, you're safe. And in case there is something that has happened to me, inform my family, he wasn't safe at all.
Yeah.
So when it comes to some other stuff like pandemics and security, I think you should try our shoe. Try our shoe.
Try
Our shoes.
Try
Yeah.
their shoes. Try refugees' shoes. You have asked if Turkanas do not feel like they're people in Turkana
To be
do not
honest,
feel they're part of Kenya.
They don't even know they're Kenyans.
Refugees. Yeah. Where will refugees start from?
So
Yeah,
what
maybe I
about
can
us?
ask you that question.
Like, let me tell you something.
Between the host, between the locals serving the refugees in these agencies and the refugees serving refugee members, who should be more of serving each other or a humanitarian?
I believe that by the time someone comes to my home, it is because they are in need. So I need to be able to accommodate this person and offer service to them.
Or who
Yeah,
deserves
so-
to be
so
called
then-
more humanitarian than the other?
I should be able to offer more services because I am hosting. Because I chose to host.
You should be
you
noble.
know?
But in
Yeah,
contrary, it's the refugees now who does a lot and paid less. It does not matter.
it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I think on that angle, it's now narrowed down to policies.
Yes.
Even
There's
she
no such
talks
a
about
policy?
she talks about something very interesting about security and documents. Security and documents, from my understanding and research, it's that our documents have never been gazetted and legalized as normal travel documents. So that's why
Okay.
the camps were formed to enclose the refugees in a space, yeah?
Like you should be
Yeah,
someone.
like we are enclosed, and that's the theory that was adapted when refugees first came in 1992. Yeah, so that policy is still there. So there is no mobility.
Oh, the
the camps are
encampment-
enclosed. Yeah,
encampment policy.
encampment policy. It has never been revisited. So you find for you to travel outside the camp, you have to validate your documents from UNHCR and counter check with the Kenyan government. Now the Kenyan government will look at your reason for leaving the camp. If your reason is education, it has to be validated by UNHCR with a supportive document that Maya is going to Nairobi for this amount of months and she's going to be away for this long. So with that later now, I go to the Kenyan government, the RAS. They validate that and they give me a travel document.
For traveling within Kenya.
Yeah. So now I use my refugee identification card and a travel document to stay here in Nairobi. If my travel document expires, then there is no chance of me going back to the camp to renew it. So I have to counter check again with the Nairobi UNHCR office to also give me a letter again to go to the Kenyan government to give me a travel document to go back to the camp. If I disregard that process, then I am vulnerable to arrest on the way. I'll even if I show my student ID, it's invalid. Why are you outside the camp? And I'm like, I was in school
Our freedom
and my
of
document has
movement.
expired. Where were you when the document expired? So most of the time, you are required to pay, money to get to get where you want to go,
Yeah.
or you're arrested. And now the arrest, it's also a process, like, obtaining the right documents. So when you're arrested, someone has to report with UNHCR, counter-check their records while you are outside the camp. So you stay there longer. So you rather opt your way out by paying money and you're allowed into the camp. The same with medical emergencies. You'll find it's an emergency. You need to be in an operation room. But there's so much procedure. By the time we get to the patient, they're already dead.
Yeah.
Too much bureaucracy.
There's too
Yeah,
much
the
bureaucracy
same
and red
process.
tape,
Yeah, the same process of documentation also applies to work. And the difficulty I have, it's now we have scholarship opportunities for refugees, but our documents have never been validated. So when we are looking for internship opportunities, people do not recognize our identification cards as valid. That's why we have an issue with the registration of M-Pesa. We have an issue with accessing things like banks. We have an issue with, being taken by organizations for internships. You ask, but your ID is very different. and it states that you should be in a refugee camp. So with this, we are still using the the encamping policy, and we have not revisited the policy that now refugees need to be let outside to explore some of the opportunities. And even if opportunities present themselves, it's very hard to navigate. The process is long. And it's very tedious. And if you don't follow it, then you end up on the wrong side of the law. And that's why now it's important to go to the grassroots. Like, why do we need conversation? What's the problem? I usually tell people, we talk about durable solution for refugees, but we missed things like documentation. How do you talk about inclusion? It's such a broad topic. And you are forgetting things like documentations are also limiting. So that's why now we push for advocacy and awareness creation to know that these documents are people that live here and they need to be traveled. It's very unfortunate. You find a chance to travel outside Kenya, you can't, because your document again is invalid. So you go to UNHCR to validate your document, give you a CTD, and it's a vetting process. Give you a CTD signed out by Kenya, police clearance, and you're allowed to travel, and limiting for 2 months.
Okay.
And you have to come back before it expires. Otherwise, when it expires, when you're on the other side of the country, then it's, you're in chaos.
So that's a whole other thing altogether. So now, how do we coexist? How, having outlined all these barriers that have been consciously or subconsciously formed, documentation, policy, it's like hindrance after hindrance after hindrance. So how can the host community coexist with the refugee community? And at this point, when I am spelling it out, I realize that even saying host community and refugee community is already placing tags. But how do we coexist? And not just coexist in a way that we are not fighting, but we're just, tolerating each other. No, how do we coexist in a peaceful manner? Yeah? So I would like us to start with you, Apollo. Is it with you, Apollo? And then we'll come to Jean-Paul, and then we'll wrap with you, Maya. Then we'll do the last question.
Okay. How we would coexist? I would start with, it is already a conflict. You're conflicting these two parties. I would like, for the host community to listen to the refugee community, to involve them, I would also say the host community should be able to accommodate the refugee community to a certain point, there should be a voice that is brought out there. And that's why I'm using my poetry as a voice from the refugee community. I would like to tell my stories or our stories as a whole to the whole world. And, they shouldn't have a certain perception of who a refugee should be or should look like. And that's why I'm starting from the grassroots of who we really are or where we're heading to and how we should be taken, and being a voice of my community it has been an eye opener for everyone else out there, because, people get to learn of who we really are. We're humans to start with. We are humans. And, I think involvement is the major thing to do here. Get to involve them and get to know of who they really are, and what they should, how they interact, get to know how they do their things, starting from human, the basic thing is because they are humans. And then, humans as a whole, we have our own ways of doing things, and having to exclude refugees gives them psychological, there's this tension that refugees do have, how will I be treated if I get to interact with my host community? Okay. From the start, they have been taken as violent persons, and then this really triggers them, psychologically, and it's not good at all. It's not appropriate. That's the exact word to use. It's not appropriate to term them as violent or aggressive persons because of nature. When you say nature, I come from a violent country, a war-torn country, but I'm not violent personally. I'm not aggressive. I think I'm a laid-back person, and it's not good to term them as such. There's this case where my little sister, she was born in Kenya, nurtured in Kenya. They've never been to South Sudan. They've never had a gunshot. That is. So they're playing with their fellow children, their age mates, and they are secluded because they're too dark. And then they're like, how do you dark people, always leave? And my sister, it hit her. So she comes back home. She's just 11 and asks, Apollo, how should we be? Because
we
children,
as dark people.
Yeah, as in Wasudi. This term Wasudi. They use, Wasudi. Mbona tunaitwa Wasudi, kwani hatufai mingle na Kenyans, because they are taken in some other way, and it hits them psychologically because they've never been to any other country. They are Kenyans. They take themselves as Kenyans, but they are South Sudanese. And, it starts with how you're nurturing your child, because how a child speaks out there is how you've nurtured them as a mother, as a parent. It starts with you as a parent at home. How are you bringing up these children? The upbringing of your children portrays of what will be said out there. When your child goes and discriminates xenophobia, that is like how it happened in South Africa, it hits another child, and it's not good at all.
Yeah.
When a child comes and asks me tunafaa kuaje, tunafaa kuaktaje huko nje, unajua nyinyi wakubwa muniambie, and then you're even confused of where you'll start from. So the host community, it will start with your upbringing of your little child. Children shouldn't be separated, this is Kenyan, this is South Sudanese, this is who and who. They are children, and they do not know any race. They do not know any tribe. So it's you as a parent, as how are you bringing up your child?
Yeah. So there's need to teach children from a young age. Yeah. There's need to communicate even to the adults and people.
These are your fellow age mates. As in, don't try and separate
don't
them.
Separate.
Yeah,
so
because children are loving, by the way, and if you say something, it kind of gets to them. And they start questioning stuff, because children don't assume anything. They question
ask
everything.
Questions, yeah. Mm-hmm. So there's need to also further integrate. Mm-hmm. So I want to throw a question there, which will be our final question, so that by the time Jean-Paul and Maya, you answer my previous question, we will just get back to my pending question and address it in our closing. Yeah. So, Camp 22, camp closure, looming camp closure, yeah? And part of the recommendations is that proper documentation should be done, and faster. I think proper and faster documentation should be done for inclusion of refugees who are for inclusion of refugees. There's the repatriation option, and there's also the resettlement option. But I'd want us to dwell on the integration option and what that would look like stemming from these conversations. Is this a chance to actually build a very peaceful ecosystem that supports everyone, that is inclusive of everyone, members of the host communities, refugees, yeah? So let's just leave that hanging here. You can stew over that one, and then you answer my final questions. I mean, if you're able to mash them all up, fine. But yeah, not to you, Jean-Paul.
Yeah, thank you so much, Joey. Maybe I may begin by appreciating my two fellow panelists. They have said it all, because when it comes to your previous question,
Yeah, on
yes, there is
coexistence.
a need of inclusion, and how should it happen? So we need to do a lot of civic education so that people, they get to understand who is a refugee and why they fled their country to Kenya. Because there is a lot of potential that you can tap into refugees and you can benefit a lot. It's only that people, they are so judgmental. So rather you should accommodate them and get to hear their story first. If a visitor comes to your place, then you need to give that person a safe space in order for that particular individual to open up and express himself. So there is need of having this conversation between the refugee and the host community in order to coexist. So starting from the Nyumba Kumi, you are still discriminated. So particularly when she says something in 2013, I don't know if you are aware, 2013, 2014, there is something that happened in South Sudan that Kenyans were being harassed. That's how people say it.
Yes.
And I had a conversation with a couple of friends who are Kenyans. I told them, don't you think it is the same way you treat them here? That's
Reciprocity.
so. How do you expect? If you treated me this way, yes, I pray for you that nothing happens to you, but in case you need my help, do you think I'll be of help? Or now will traumatize you more and more? Because, yes, it happens. You don't expect like, okay, I will live in Kenya forever. No. Get to learn what happened. There's a lot you can learn from refugees. How did it happen? Yes, when we were back home at our young age, we used to laugh at Burundian refugees who fled to Congo. But now later on, we became refugees. How did it happen? And why? So it is not something that you should laugh at anybody. Rather, give that person a safe space in order to open up and share the experiences. Because there's a lot, like when people are championing for politicians, yes, it is the same politician that will make you become a refugee. Tomorrow, you champion for me today, tomorrow you become a refugee. His family is already abroad, enjoying the good life. But for you, you are now here with me. So we didn't know. So it's good to have this conversation on how we can live in peace and harmony, accommodate each other, to avoid this kind of discrimination, ethnicity. You'll get to learn more from the refugees because that's how you get to build peace. You don't wait until you are in a war situation.
So we start now.
We start the conversation now.
Yeah.
Because, yes, you might be. I don't say that you don't champion for anyone, but we should know how to do it.
Okay.
Much more better, that will not cause harm or conflict
So sustainable,
amongst ourselves.
productive conversations. Yeah.
So that one at least should start from now.
Thank you.
Engage the refugees. You will learn from them.
Yeah.
Because they have gone through a lot. They have the experience. They will tell you, as she previously said, Apollo, like a child, they are so quick in learning. They learn very fast. If you tell a child this, tomorrow she will ask you
Another question. Yeah.
that you will not be able to respond. Why are we in Kenya? If we are treated like this, why did you choose to come to Kenya? That becomes a question. And rather, they should have a safe space where they can interact with their age mates. For instance, I had a friend who was in Kakuma, used to live in Nairobi. During the Usalama Watch, he was taken to camp by force. And yet, there is already a family separation. He was married to a Kenyan. Now, what will the children be called? Refugees or Kenyans? Because, yes, children, they were much more attached to their father than the mother. So don't you think you're also traumatizing these kids who are supposed to enjoy both parental
Love and care.
yes, love and care?
Wait, you are raising you're raising very pertinent issues, and I really hope that this is something that we will not only think about but also activate, talking about communicating, talking about having conversations with our children, with our siblings, and integrating persons into our society. So thank you for the insight.
And also maybe you
Yeah.
can't stop love.
So yeah, stop love.
Simply because they are refugees, they should not get in love with the Kenyans.
Love is love.
Love is love. And
Doesn't
also,
have boundaries.
lastly, when it comes to integration,
Yeah.
we talk of durable solution. Most of people, they only think about resettlement. Is the last option. Resettlement takes 0.2% of the refugee population in Kenya. So where do you take the rest of refugees? The first option should be repatriation. If the person is not in a position to go back due to fear of persecution, what else? Integration is the second option.
Yeah, I think
We should be mainly,
Sorry.
yeah.
Yeah, I think there are those three options that are given. Yeah, voluntary repatriation, resettlement, which you have pointed out is 0.02%, and integration into the society. That is, if camp closure ensues. So yeah, I was just throwing it in there that there were those three options, but I'm glad you brought that up, because since you're still on that topic, maybe you can just complete that line of thought in terms of what 2022 would look like with that inclusion. Would this mean that now we have a place for coexistence and peace? Yeah. So maybe since you're already on that trajectory, you can just merge it. Yeah.
Yeah, it can still be possible. It only depends with the political goodwill. If they're willing to do it, yes, consider not everyone comes from, refer to the agreement or the debate that is on between the UNHCR and the government of Kenya. So they would only consider maybe the people coming from the East African to be facilitated with this kind of documentation. Where will others go to if they do not have that option of voluntary repatriation, or they don't fit criteria, let's say, for resettlement? What else? So we should start thinking of roadmap.
Very pertinent issues again.
So that involve the refugees, bring them on board. You don't discuss your children matter without them being there, and yet they're already grown-ups.
Yeah. So no conversations for the refugees without the refugees.
Because the refugees knows them better than
the ones
anyone
just
else.
talking about it. Yeah, thank you so much. Maya, you have 2 questions to go at it.
Yeah, 2 questions, and I think the issue of coexistence narrow back to the closure of the camp.
Yeah.
How do we coexist if we already have an existing conflict?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Exactly.
The closure of the camp is as a result of conflict. It's about stereotyping an entire community to be harmful to the host community. So there is already a disconnect. So now, how are you looking for coexistence with a disconnect? Yeah?
We need to address
Yeah,
it.
we are missing the point here. And if we are going for integration, then I like to differ with him. It's not going to be smooth. It's going to be chaotic. Chaotic in that you can't integrate me without understanding who I am. You can't integrate me if you already have assumptions on me. You're already assuming I'm harmful to your society.
Yeah.
You're already thinking you have limited resources that are not benefiting you. So now that's why you have never validated my documentation, because you don't want me to compete with you on a fair ground. So with those issues still being withheld, how are you integrating me? On what terms? am I supposed to be integrated with unlimited opportunities? Like, you are integrating me and you have inside clause of you also can't access this.
The
You
fine
see,
print.
do you think it's going to sit well with me? Already there is a conflict and there is a disconnect between integration and peace coexistence. So I feel like we go back again to where this conflict started: assumptions and stereotyping. What do? We try to advocate and create awareness, unlearning and relearning. And after we do that, and I think we have been given so much time to be doing that, why are we still applying the same system that was implemented 3 decades ago? Why are we still applying that? Yet the nature of the refugees that we are receiving right now, the people who are educated, the people coming from urban centers, they're not from rural, but the setup of a refugee camp, it's like they were making assumptions we are all from rural settings, yeah? So we should go farm, and farming is not possible in Turkana. Turkanas have not succeeded in farming. So why will refugee come and farm? You know? So I feel if we talk about the closure of the camps, again, you're closing it because I'm a threat. So there is a disconnect for coexistence. We go back to the grassroots. Where are we missing the point? We talk about, durable solution for refugees. It has never been achieved worldwide. So this brings a question. Are we implementing durable solutions by policymakers, shareholders, without having refugees? Refugees might actually have durable solutions for their
To their own
problems.
issues.
Yeah. We might think integration is the easiest, but integration comes with opportunities. Integration again will come with insecurities. So if it's the same insecurity you're doing away with, then how are you integrating? You see? So to me, I feel like it's not making sense, because the first step will be to facilitate where the problem is. Go on the ground, trying to see what can be done, what can be rectified, and how can we have models in place to make sure that we train and we also create awareness. We train refugees to integrate smoothly and also create awareness to the host community. There is a brand new of individuals that are going to be integrated here.
Yeah.
So how do we do that? So there should be a really cautious and very sensitive procedure in place, because if we are not sensitive about it, there is going to be chaos. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for highlighting that. Thank you for highlighting the need for civic education. Thank you for even bringing up the bit where the camp closure is as a result of feeling threatened. So now what? So let's work from the solution would definitely be working from the ground up and having a conversations about refugees with refugees, and then seeking solutions from those conversations. Yeah. Now, you are my last one on my final question, ma'am.
Yeah, I would say it will be quite chaotic. It will really be chaotic because refugees are not only in the camps, they are dispersed across Kenya. So when you say you're repatriating refugees, and repatriation is willing repatriation. Yeah. So am I willing to go back to a war-torn country where I don't feel safe? Am I willing to go back and die? Let's say so. Because if I'm going to a war-torn country where most of our fathers cemented that country, I don't feel safe there. So if you are trying again to resettle me, is where I'm going safe for me?
Yeah.
Is where the place where you're taking me, is it a safe haven for me? And if it was a safe haven, then why didn't I go there before I came here? I think it will be quite a process, because what will you do with those of us who are here? You don't know me. You don't know the next person who's a refugee and is in Kenya, in Kiambu or, Kitui. We are all dispersed everywhere. We're just not South Sudanese. We're just not Somalis. We have Ethiopians. We have those, everyone is here. And then again, the third one was, work permits. Are we in the first place working in Kenya? No, we're not. And if we are, then we have been given a certain, place. We have been cocooned somewhere. And if you are telling us that we are going to have a place reserved for us to work, it only applies to those of the East African countries. So, once again, South Sudan is not yet an East African country. So, what are you trying to do with me? You're trying to throw me where I shouldn't be. You're trying to get me back to, a place where it's not safe. In these three options, I have none. So, who am I here? And if it is only for the East African countries, then what happens to those from Somalia? They can't go back to Somalia. It's not safe. It's not even a state at the moment. It's taken as a failed state. So if you're trying to take someone from a failed state back to their home and either going to, resettle them, they are taken in some kind of way, their religion is perceived as terror, So if someone of their religion goes elsewhere, they will first be stopped at the airport and, you might be taken back to where you came from. So it's all chaotic. You're trying to take someone who is feeling safe in your space to a more unsafe place for them. So have you even in the first place tried to see if they feel comfortable with that? Have you involved them in these discussions? Have you, in the first place, have you tried put yourself in that person's shoe? Yeah, it's the theme here, and I really like it.
Try my shoe.
Try my shoe, or put your child in that situation.
Yeah.
If you're not remorseful enough.
Let's think of
think of your child
and not think of others. Let's include them.
Yeah, include them.
So, thank you so much, Apollo. Thank you so much, Jean-Paul. Thank you so much, Maya. Thank you for this conversation. I feel like so much can be said and should be said, and this is why we are having Try My Shoe series. We are here for these conversations, these particular conversations, and more. Maya, you mentioned education. You mentioned you mentioned resettlement and reintegration, and we actually have some of this in our agenda in this podcast. Things that we need to tackle. We are very informed, very aware that we are not informed, and so we need to inform. And that is where you, our audience, comes in. You get informed with us. So thank you so much for sitting through this and listening. And we look forward to your engagement on our social media. So find us on Refugee Poet. It's up on this banner, Refugee Poet. And also Anika. So that the two social media platforms we're using, Refugee Poet and two social media handles we're using, Refugee Poet and Anika. So find us, talk to us, ask questions, engage us in this conversation. Where you feel like we have gone astray, tell us. Let's have a conversation, because this will aid in what we are trying to achieve here, which is learning and unlearning and reinforcing positive narratives about people, so that at the end of the day, we remember to create a world where homes are not defined by origins. So thank you so much for tuning in. Please listen to the previous podcasts if you haven't. And if you have, we look forward to hosting you on the rest. Thank you, and take care of yourself. Bye.
The online dialogue series of RefuPoet was commissioned by the Special Initiative on Displacement SIF program of the Civil Peace Service of GIZ. We appreciate the discussions and insights shared. The opinions expressed in these dialogue series are those of the speakers. They do not necessarily reflect the opinions or views of GIZ.